Let not your heart be troubled. You are listening to the Sean Hannity Radio Show podcast. All right, so I have insomnia, but I've never slept better. And what's changed? Just a pillow. It's had such a positive impact on my life. And, of course, I'm talking about MyPillow. I fall asleep faster, I stay asleep longer, and now you can, too. Just go to MyPillow.com or call 800-919-6090. Use the promo code Hannity, and Mike Lindell, the inventor of MyPillow, has the special 4-pack. Now, you get 40% off 2 MyPillow Premiums and 2 Go Anywhere pillows. Now, MyPillow is made here in the USA, has a 60-day unconditional money-back guarantee, and a 10-year warranty. Go to MyPillow.com right now or call 800-919-6090, promo code Hannity, to get Mike Lindell's special 4-pack offer. You get 2 MyPillow premium pillows and 2 Go Anywhere pillows for 40% off. And that means once those pillows arrive, you start getting the kind of peaceful and restful and comfortable and deep healing and recuperative sleep that you've been craving and you certainly deserve. MyPillow.com, promo code Hannity. You will love this pillow. We are in Chicago today. A lot of breaking news all over the place. We will be all over it all day. Obviously, the terror attack in London. We're going to update you on the very latest all throughout the afternoon. We have a vote tomorrow on the health care repeal replace bill. As of now, the Freedom Caucus remains against it. 2 of those members will join us and tell us why. And they claim that they have the votes to stop this bill in the House of Representatives. Also, President Trump vindicated on his wiretap claim, unless you don't think surveillance of Trump Tower and the president or the president-elect of the United States is wiretapping. Surveillance, same thing. We're now splitting hairs. But the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes says he has learned of, yes, the collection of communications concerning not only the president-elect but his transition team during surveillance operations. Donald Trump right, Sean Hannity right, Sarah Carter was right, John Solomon was right. We've been telling you for 2 weeks, and the rest of the alt-left propaganda destroy Trump media with egg on its face once again. We have to start and begin in London where, yes, more terror on this case in Europe.
I'm the National Head of Counter-Terrorism Policing, and I'm also Acting Deputy Commissioner. I want to make a statement about this afternoon's events, and I'm going to try and cover 3 main areas. What we know about the incident, the ongoing operation, and what London can expect over the coming days. As you know, we've declared this as a terrorist incident, and the Counter-Terrorism Command are carrying out a full-scale investigation into the events today. The attack started when a car was driven over Westminster Bridge, hitting and injuring a number of members of the public, also including 3 police officers on their way back from a commendation ceremony. The car then crashed near to Parliament, and at least 1 man, armed with the knife, continued the attack and tried to enter Parliament. Sadly, I can confirm that now 4 people have died. That includes the police officer who was protecting Parliament, and 1 man we believe to be the attacker who was shot by a police firearms officer. The officer's family have been made aware. At least 20 people have been injured. As part of long-established and well-rehearsed plans, Parliament has been locked down and the Met responded in line with our plans for a marauding terrorist attack. That response included uniformed and specialist firearms officers. We now, of course, have an ongoing operation, and whilst we currently believe there was only 1 attacker, I'm sure the public will understand us taking every precaution in locking down and searching the area as thoroughly and exhaustively as possible. And I know that the officials working within Parliament and public in the area completely understand the need to do this, and I thank them for their patience and their support. This investigation has the full weight and expertise of the Counter-Terrorism Command behind it. And if there are people who saw the events unfold today but haven't yet spoken to us, I would urge them to get in touch. A crime scene will remain in place in the affected areas in Westminster, and it is understand it's vital we carry out a painstaking investigation to recover all the possible evidence. Looking forward, throughout the rest of the day, including when people are commuting home, and indeed over the days that follow, the people of London will see extra police officers armed and unarmed on our streets. This includes our officers working longer hours and extra shifts alongside our colleagues from British Transport Police in the City of London. And of course, as you're aware, we can call on the support of the military should we need to at a future point. We are also in the process of opening up our casualty bureau to help those people who are worried about friends and family who may have been caught up in the attack. Furthermore, we're reaching out to communities and community leaders across London to reassure them. Our strength as a city depends on our ability to stand together at such terrible times. If anyone sees anything suspicious or anything that causes concern, please do contact us. Don't hesitate. My thoughts are with all those who have been affected by today's attack. And as a service, we've lost one of our own as he acted to protect the public and his colleagues. This is a day we planned for, but we hope would never happen. Sadly, it's now a reality. We will continue to do all we can to protect the people of London.
All right, that is obviously the latest. Let me give you the bottom line here. It was two basically separate attacks, coordinated, obviously. You'd have to be pretty dumb to assume anything else. You have at least two people now confirmed dead, including one police officer, and more than 20-plus people injured. Parliament has, in fact, been shut down there. You have this incident that saw the police officer stabbed and killed in one place, and then on the bridge, you have as many as a dozen people run over outside of London's Parliament building, and basically they mowed down pedestrians on London's Westminster Bridge, leaving, in that case, more than a dozen with injuries described by many as just catastrophic. And at the same time, you had a knife-wielding attacker stabbing a police officer and was shot on the grounds outside of Britain's Parliament, sending the compound into obvious lockdown. Now, originally the reports, and I'm getting more information about this, I don't have full confirmation, but I'm going to let you in on what we do know now. But the assailant, 30s or 40s, carrying a 7 to 8-inch knife, just to give you some awareness. You know, some states have knives that you can carry, non-switchblade, that usually are anywhere between the 3.5 to 4.5 inch range. So this is about twice the size of what would normally in a state be a legal knife to carry. It's unclear if the person shot by police and the driver are the same person. They weren't able to confirm that at this point. London keeps us talking about the number of casualties. The cleanup continues. But, it's just another example of another terror attack. And then one has to wonder, okay, what is the motivation? And I know in many people's minds, you're not allowed to assume at this early point that this could in any way be terror-related. But the reality is that is where a normal person's first thought would go in light of all of the attacks that have happened in Paris and in France and in Germany and in Great Britain and in Brussels and Belgium and all throughout the rest of Europe. And we have talked at length on this program about the Islamization, not only of Great Britain, but all of Europe. And we talk about, for example, there was an article going back some time, the Islamization of Britain in 2016 is more backwards than some parts of Pakistan. And remember, at different points all throughout the Obama presidency, man-caused disasters, overseas contingency operations, workplace violence, none of which happen to be true here. And then it brings into context and focus all of the issues that President Trump not only ran on, but also is now fighting, and that is building a wall to protect our southern border, where drugs and human trafficking and guns and the potential for terrorists to cross into our country from an open border is so important. And secondly, the issue of vetting refugees from countries. I mean, I've said this before. A lot of people don't believe it. There are no-go zones in Paris, even though the mainstream media won't admit it. It's a fact. It is a fact that there are, 83 separate Sharia courts that have been established in Great Britain alone, and Sharia courts that are administered by, Islamic justice. In other words, not subject to assimilation and a system of laws in Great Britain that everybody else is, in fact, subordinate to. Anyway, in Sharia law run by some clerics, well, what does that mean? You can chop off somebody's hand, as they do in some of these countries that practice Sharia? Anyway, we're teaching children fundamental British values as an act of cultural supremacism, according to the National Union of Teachers, that wanted to replace the concept with one that includes international rights. That's what Great Britain has been struggling and debating in their country. And I assume if America continues to take in refugees from countries that have values and cultures that directly contradict our constitutional values and cultures, then that clash of civilization that a few of us are willing and brave enough to talk about. You know, if you grow up in a country where you have a right to tell women what to wear, you grow up in a country and you have a right to tell a woman she can't drive a car, and you have a right to tell a woman she can't go out and travel wherever she wants to travel or needs a male relative to even walk in the neighborhood, but of course fully covered. I mean, it's insane. Marital rape is legal in some of these countries that practice Sharia. Gays and lesbians are slaughtered and thrown off roofs and hung and beaten. Christians and Jews often persecuted. Well, how do you mesh those two conflicting cultures? You know, there's a study, a 615-page study that came out, and it happened to be more than 100,000 British Muslims. They actually sympathize with suicide bombers who commit other acts of terror. And also, according to this survey, only 1 in 3 British Muslims, 34%, would contact the police if they believed that somebody close to them had become involved with radical Islam. The same poll showed 23% of British Muslims said Islamic Sharia law should replace British law in areas with large Muslim populations. Well, what that means, you're having countries within a country here. And it's not much different than the crime statistics that I gave out about Germany just last week on this program. I won't rehash all of those now. But now we've got over 20 injured, 2 dead, catastrophic injuries. You got a car driven by a knifeman mowing down pedestrians on Westminster Bridge. Now, in the end, maybe it'll turn out this isn't radical Islam. We don't know. But there is evidence beginning to emerge here that we're paying attention to. We know that there is a Zero Hedge article that came out. London terrorism suspect is named as a hate preacher. Anyway, press reports circulating. Not confirmed at this time. I want to be very clear. We're just trying to get a grip on this, so I won't mention his name. But what we do know is the reports that the convicted terror fundraiser, this guy whose name I do know that I'm not talking about, branded a Muslim chaplain who served British soldiers, was named a traitor for working with the UK government, added his, that the firebrand preacher encouraged, in other words, he said about a Muslim chaplain that he was a traitor for helping work for the UK government and serve British soldiers, and has encouraged followers to look out for the cleric. In other words, basically threatening this guy. Apparently, there might be a connection, we're looking into this now, between this very same cleric that I'm talking about and Anjem Chowdhury, the guy that I called one sick, evil, twisted son of a bitch on my TV show one day, which kind of went viral not only here, but in London and elsewhere. Anyway, you have some ISIS supporters that we now know from the Telegraph reporting, cheering the attack on Westminster and suggesting it's revenge for the United Kingdom strikes on ISIS in Syria. So there's sympathetic people on the ground there. One said the UK was paying blood for its involvement in the U.S.-led coalition's campaign against jihadists. Well, does it now bring into focus once again, if the Boston bombing didn't do it, if Fort Hood didn't do it, if Chattanooga didn't do it, if the Pulse nightclub in Orlando didn't do it, if San Bernardino didn't do it, if France and Belgium and Great Britain and Sweden and all throughout Europe, those attacks didn't do it, maybe now does it bring into focus the danger of unvetted refugees and open borders? How many times do we have to repeat the words, our thoughts and prayers go out to the families and the victims? Now, we mean it. We're sincere. I just wish we didn't have to say it so often. I wish we would take the threat seriously. I wish we were dedicated in protecting, first and foremost, the American people. I can't believe, the president can't even do his job as commander-in-chief because the left wing has designed a strategy that they're going out there and they're going to fight him in the courts and everywhere else. All right, we're a little late here.
Prices are for base buildings only. Do not include windows, doors, or accessories. Warning! Don't let your business get left behind in what is likely to be the biggest economic boom in recent history. If you need to build to grow your business, call General Steel today. Steel prices are expected to rise, but you can still lock in your price on a General Steel building if you call now. For example, a 40 by 60 foot building is still less than $25,000. Even an 80 by 150 foot building is under $99,000. Imagine Imagine 12,000 square feet for under $99,000. This building is designed for your needs, no wasted space. And you get the General's quality and 50-year structural warranty at a price you can afford. You can still save as much as half the cost and time of conventional construction by calling General Steel today. As much as half. So don't let rising steel prices put your project out of reach and stop you from making your company great. Call now. 877-81-STEEL. It's not too late. Call 877-81-STEEL. That's 877-817-8335.
All right, as we roll along, 800-941-SEAN, you want to be a part of the program. Trump vindicated on the wiretap law. We're going to get into that right after the bottom of the hour here. This is a big, big deal. This is not a small deal. Also, we have Newt Gingrich weighing in on the terror attack. It looks like the Freedom Caucus has the votes to stop this repeal replacement bill, and we'll have Freedom Caucus members on the program today. We have a reporter also at the bottom of the next hour out of London, and we will be debating in our second hour all of the issues surrounding radical Islamic terrorism, refugees, the European problem that could potentially become the American problem. I've got more details now. They're reporting 3 have been confirmed killed. And the Prime Minister of Great Britain was only 40 yards from where this attack took place. We have the first photo of the suspect in the Daily Mail that they put out. It looks like the person whose name I have in front of me, but you know what? Why give this guy any credit or any infamy anyway? But it looks like we were right on it. This is the anniversary of the Brussels massacre. We have ISIS is now celebrating, and they are using the term blood for blood. And so that's just the latest of what's happening on the ground there. But, you know, less than a year ago, remember, London has a new mayor, Sadiq Khan, the first Muslim ever to hold the title of mayor of London. And he said, this is going back when the first terror attack when he was mayor, he said, describing by authorities a terror incident. Anyway, so he had said, my thoughts are with those affected and their families. A year ago, he stated the terror attacks were, quote, a part and parcel of living in a big city. Is that the answer? We're just going to give in? We're going to give up? We're just going to accept this is the new normal, that people get to mow down and kill innocent men, women, and children? I don't think so. We'll continue our top 3 stories right after this. All right, we update you if you're just joining us. Of course, the horrible attack that took place in London from earlier today. Now the British police are saying that 4 have been killed and more than 20 people have been injured. We know that ISIS says this is blood for blood. They're out celebrating. Prime Minister was only 40 yards from this attack. The suspect in this particular case is now confirmed dead. We have many, many other people that are injured very severely in a catastrophic way almost. So we have that we're also following today. Other stories that we're going to get to here in a second. Devin Nunes confirms that the Trump team was, in fact, surveilled, and Trump Tower itself was surveilled, and Donald Trump himself was surveilled, and we have more questions than answers, which means that, once again, that the news media was wrong, and, of course, Donald Trump was right, and Sean Hannity was right, and Sarah Carter was right, and John Solomon was right, just like we were right about the election, just like we were right about Obama, just we were right about the media won't tell you the truth about Obama's failed record. Just like they colluded with Hillary, we were right about that, too. Anyway, the reporting of this police officer also was stabbed and killed in this incident. And that's the very latest out of that. We're also following today the issue of health care and the lead up to this vote that is taking place tomorrow. And as of right now, Freedom Caucus members are now saying that, in fact, they do not have the votes to pass this bill. So we're going to find out what that means as well. In any second now, we're going to be joined by Benjamin Hall, who's a Fox News foreign correspondent. And, by the way, author of the book Inside ISIS and the Brutal Rise of a Terrorist Army. And he's on the ground in London, and apparently we had him and we just lost him. And when we get him back, we'll bring him to you. Just to give you some headlines as it relates to what Devin Nunes is saying, is this is really dangerous. Donald Trump tweets out, yeah, he was wiretapped. Donald Trump was right, because members of the Donald Trump transition team, including the president himself, were under U.S. government surveillance. What have we been telling you for 2 weeks? What has Sarah Carter and John Solomon been reporting? And this happened apparently in November. It happened in December and at least up until and including January, according to the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes. Nunes says the surveillance appears to be legal. We don't know all the answers yet, and that he's concerned because it was not related to the FBI's investigation into Russia's meddling in the election, and apparently was also widely disseminated across the intelligence community, which then goes back to my argument about what Obama did with 14 days to leave before leaving office, and that was amending Executive Order 12333. He said, I've seen intelligence reports that clearly show that the president-elect and his team monitored, and it looks to me, at this point, it might be legally collected, but it was essentially a lot of information on the president-elect and his transition team and what they were doing. Wow. Nunes said that he's headed to the White House to brief the president on what it is that he has learned, which he said it came from sources who thought that he should know it, that we should know it. And he says he's trying to get more information from the FBI, CIA, and NSA. What have I been telling you? These intelligence leaks are not by accident. The deep state is real. That there is a clear and present danger now that this president and his entire team is facing. Nunes described the surveillance as, well, at least for now, the incidental collection, which can occur when a person inside the U.S. communicates with a foreign target of U.S. surveillance. But in those cases, the identities of U.S. citizens, as we've been told you, are supposed to be minimized. In other words, the listening is actually minimized by the intelligence agency looking into it. But it can be unmasked by intelligence officials under certain circumstances. But like in the case of General Flynn, that never should have been made known. That was a felony and a violation of the Espionage Act. Nunes also saying his new information appears to show that additional members beyond Michael Flynn were also unmasked. And that means they were identified in U.S. intelligence reports. More and more, this is looking political. More and more, this is looking that people at very high levels within the intelligence community were potentially committing multiple felonies. We'll get back to this in a minute, but first for an update on these terror attacks in London. Ben Hall with us, Fox News foreign correspondent, author of Inside of ISIS, The Brutal Rise of a Terrorist Army. First of all, Benjamin, our thoughts and prayers go out to our friends in Great Britain and the victims and their families, but you know, there's a lot to discuss here. First, tell us the very latest on what's happened.
Well, absolutely, and we're just hearing now that this is very much a terror investigation. The police confirming that 4 people dead, including the assailant, as well as a policeman, a 30-year-old woman as well. It started off at about 2:35. You know, you could not pick a place that is more surveilled, more famous than the House of Parliament. And that's exactly where it was, and exactly why he would have carried it out here. It is getting the attention that he perhaps was looking for. At 2:35, he veered off the road into the sidewalk on the Westminster Bridge, and he mowed down, we know, about 20 people there. He then proceeded in his car to the Houses of Parliament, where he rammed into one of the entrances before running inside with a long knife, stabbing a policeman, who we also sadly know has passed away, and then charged at 2 other armed policemen. Now, they shouted at him to stop. He didn't, and they took him down. We know he was killed during that exchange of gunfire. It was just shortly after Prime Minister's Questions, which is a weekly event here when the Prime Minister answers questions from members of Parliament. And she was in the House at the time. Parliament, as well as all the streets around it, were locked down immediately. She was eventually bundled out of the building in a grey Jaguar and taken away to safety. But there are still people, and I'm speaking to friends and colleagues inside Parliament. They are still inside some of those offices. They're not being allowed to leave. But there are helicopters overhead. There are boats on the River Thames. There are ambulances, sirens constantly. But it does seem as if now, speaking of Scotland Yard, that the situation is under control. This was a vehicle-borne attack, and many people call that quite an unsophisticated attack, but there's very little you could do to stop it, no matter how much security you have. If someone is inspired and has their hands on a vehicle, you know, there's very little you can do, and that's exactly what he did. And we've seen it before in Nice. We saw it in Berlin. We've seen it twice here in the UK now. And that's exactly what happened. ISIS has been calling for these kinds of attacks. As they're on the back foot in Iraq and Syria, they've been calling on their followers through propaganda to lash out, to launch these sort of attacks. And let's not forget that today is the day that I believe it's 68 foreign ministers are meeting in D.C. to discuss the anti-ISIS coalition. And it is also 1 year to the day that 32 people were killed in brutal attacks in Brussels, both at the subway and the airport. So we don't want to speculate. We do not yet have an identity for this man, for this terrorist, but there are a number of indications pointing towards this. Together.
There was a picture that was published in the Daily Mail, and I have a name in front of me, and I'm sure you've heard of this controversial imam, this guy Anjem Chowdhury, have you not?
I've interviewed Anjem Chowdhury. He's off our streets, thank goodness. He was certainly inspiring many, many evil people. And yes, the name that you refer to as well, which is being published, I'm not sure whether we can confirm it yet, but he was a well-known part of the jihadi network here. He was often ranting.
Well, that's my question. I actually have a Twitter picture of him. I've not named him either. Could I just say his first name is Abu? We're talking about the same person?
Mm-hmm, that's correct, yeah.
There is a picture of Anjem Chowdhury and Abu, without giving his last name, together, and it looked like in the Daily Mail picture that could very well be him. Did you see the Daily Mail picture?
I haven't seen it yet. I've heard some eyewitness reports of what the attacker looked like here, and I gather it does fit the same, yes. And again, this guy was on our streets often. He was openly preaching, these sort of things, and we've recently in the UK had a crackdown on their ability to talk so openly about and spread this hatred. But for a while, it was a very grey area, and unfortunately, a lot of them were able to spout their hatred openly.
Well, it's interesting because I've had Anjem Chowdhury on my television program, once even calling him an evil, sick, twisted son of a bitch, based on his radical views, and it kind of went viral not only in the U.S. but also in the U.K. Can you talk at all, Benjamin? I have discussed at great length the migrant problem, the refugee problem, not only in Great Britain but France, as you mentioned, and Nice and Belgium and Germany, and the crime statistics that have been going through the roof. It parallels greatly with the debate in America about building a wall and extreme vetting of refugees. But one of the things that I think people are very surprised to hear is, I know some people doubt the issue of no-go zones, for example, in France, but they do exist. I know they exist, and I've confirmed it with many people and other parts of Europe. But also the fact that Great Britain itself has 83 separate Sharia courts in the country. True or false?
I wouldn't know the number myself. I mean, I do know that they exist here. And you're absolutely right. Many people, including those Brussels bombers from a year ago today, they came back in with the migrants lot. And indeed, I was in Brussels soon after that, and I was in Molenbeek, the area where many of them came from. And it's considered the jihadi hotbed, of Europe, or one of them. And it's a big part of multiculturalism. For a long time, governments, including the UK and the French, said, you're welcome to our shores. You don't need to integrate. In fact, we want you to keep your own identity. We want you to keep your religion because it's so important. Well, what that did was it created huge divisions. It effectively said, come to our country, but don't learn the language. Don't embrace our values. And it has created areas, from where many of these people come.
I wonder if with every new incident, if people don't become aware of the great cultural divide. Oh, look, Great Britain and the United States are great friends. We have an incredible history of friendship, and our relationship has been tremendous. And it's sad as an American to see this happening to a friend of ours. It really is. It breaks my heart. In New York, where I'm from, I've experienced it on 9/11. We've seen it happen in Boston. We've seen it happen in Chattanooga. We've seen it happen in Fort Hood. We've seen it happen in Orlando at the Pulse nightclub, in San Bernardino. At some point, we've got to ask the question, is this clash of cultures? If you grow up under Sharia law and men that grow up into that culture think they have the right to tell women how to dress, tell women whether they can travel, tell women they can't drive a car, when gays and lesbians are thrown off the tops of roofs and Christians and Jews are persecuted, I think knowing whether or not that person is willing to take on the values of the country that they are honored to be allowed into is a legitimate question. Is that debate now going to get louder, you think, in Great Britain?
Well, I think that debate has been going on for some time. You just look at the Brexit results. That was in part driven by a desire to control our own borders, to stop the mass migration that might be coming to our shore. So I think there's very much a sense in the UK that people want to take back control of that. They want to maintain their identity, which many people did feel was getting diluted, if you will. And, so we're seeing that here. We are seeing it, we're seeing it potentially also in the elections coming up in France. The Dutch elections didn't go, Wilders didn't win there, but we are seeing this movement across Europe, and it is a direct result of the immigration. Not only the million who went in.
You've got to be able to know who's coming into your country for safety. All right, Benjamin Hall, thank you so much, my friend. I know this has been a tough day. Our thoughts and prayers to our friends in Great Britain. Thank you, sir. Let me play some of this Devin Nunes issue, because we're going to get back to the issue of terror at the top of the next hour. Nigel Farage among our many guests. But let me play some of what Nunes is saying. The Trump team conversations, including the president-elect, caught in surveillance. Trump was right. The mainstream media wrong again. Listen.
I recently confirmed that on numerous occasions, the intelligence community incidentally collected information about U.S. citizens involved in the Trump transition. Details about U.S. persons associated with the incoming administration, details with little or no apparent foreign intelligence value, were widely disseminated in intelligence community reporting. Third, I have confirmed that additional names of Trump transition team members were unmasked. And fourth and finally, I want to be clear, none of this surveillance was related to Russia or the investigation of Russian activities or of the Trump team.
From what I know right now, it looks like incidental collection. We don't know exactly how that was picked up, but we're trying to get to the bottom of it. I believe it was all done legally. I think it was all obtained legally. It appears most of this occurred, from what I've seen, in November, December, and January. So that should probably, during the transition, that's correct. I have seen intelligence reports that clearly show that the president-elect and his team were, I guess, at least monitored and disseminated out in intelligence reporting channels.
Are you saying the surveillance, if it wasn't related to Russia or anything like that, are you saying that it was political surveillance of political opponents, as the president has suggested in his tweets?
What I've read bothers me, and I think it should bother the president himself and his team, because I think some of it seems to be inappropriate.
Unbelievable. We were right. Trump was right. Solomon and Carter were right, and the rest of the media wrong. One of our top stories today, the terrorist attack in Great Britain. We'll have more about this at the top of the next hour. We're also monitoring what is going on in terms of the health care vote. Newt Gingrich. We have also Freedom Caucus members all joining us, but we'll go back to London at the top of the hour. You want to stay with us. Top stories. Terror strikes again, this time in London. We will go to London when we get back. Nigel Farage among our many guests. Also, Raheem Kassam, who's the editor of Breitbart London. Philip Haney joins us. Then we've got Newt Gingrich weighing in, two Freedom Caucus members. Our other two stories is Devin Nunes, the House Intelligence Committee chairman, confirms surveillance of Donald Trump and Trump Towers. Donald Trump was right. And we'll update you with Freedom Caucus members on the health care bill. They are against it. Some 25 to 35. That's straight ahead as we continue from Chicago today. All right, glad you're with us. Hour 2, Sean Hannity Show, toll-free telephone number. You want to be a part of the program, 800-941-SEAN. At the top of the next hour, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, will join us, and we will check in with members of the Freedom Caucus. Three big stories we're following today. The health care vote, which, of course, expected to come tomorrow, but the Freedom Caucus says they are not on board, and they have the votes to block it. And, in fact, they will unless specific changes are made. And we'll ask Jim Jordan and Dave Bratt about that coming up. Also, huge, huge news today. Surveillance of Trump Tower has, in fact, been confirmed. Devin Nunes, who is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, confirming that earlier today. He also added one thing. I'm going to play it now before we get back to our top story and head to London for the latest. And he said Obama cannot be ruled out. Listen to this.
Did President Obama order any kind of surveillance of the president, of the president-elect?
We don't know. We don't know who sent the taskings. If the taskings were changed into what went into these intelligence reports, but we're going to try to find that out.
Can you rule out the possibility that senior Obama administration officials were involved in this?
No, we cannot.
Wow. This is getting deeper and more complicated by the minute, and we'll have a lot more on that throughout the program today. But the saddest story of the day, it is not a surprise, yet another terrorist attack, this time in London. And here are some of the sounds from throughout the day today.
Colin, I'm joined now by Stephen Voke, who was on Westminster Bridge at the time this incident happened. Steve, take us through what you saw.
Well, it's fairly busy, and I was just walking across the bridge when suddenly a bus stopped right in front of me and everybody started screaming. And I saw a trainer in the road, and first of all...
A trainer as in a shoe?
A shoe, yeah. And I thought somebody must have been hit by a car. And then I saw a body on the other side of the road, and then there was another body further up. And then when I looked over the side of the bridge, there was another body lying in the water.
Now, any indication as to what had caused those people to be injured? I mean, had you seen a car come through or anything like that?
I didn't see anything. The first thing I was aware of was just people starting to scream, and people came off the bus looking very shocked. And then there was a lot of confusion, and people started dealing with the casualties. And at that point, I just tried to stop people coming onto the bridge because still a lot of people were coming on.
How did you do that? How did you try and stop people from coming on the bridge?
Just trying to wave them back, and I think people could tell because people were screaming that something bad was happening.
Forgive me, just to go back, did you say a body in the water, you saw?
Yes. Yeah.
So a body, someone had fallen off the bridge?
Who knows, but it seemed that way. Yeah, and they were lying face down in the water.
Okay. And then what happened after that?
After that, there was a kind of a pause, and it seemed very confused for quite a long time. And then a medic arrived on a bike, and then ambulances arrived fairly quickly after that, and then the police started pouring onto the bridge. And at that point, we walked people off the bridge, and they put a tape around it.
Did you hear noises that sounded like gunshots?
I didn't know. I've heard people say that. I didn't hear that. I just heard the screaming.
Describe what you saw happen.
We was just walking up to the station, and there was a loud bang, and someone crashed a car, and so I took some pedestrians out, and they were just laying there, and then the whole crowd just surged around the corner just by the gates, just opposite Big Ben, and a guy came past my right shoulder with a big knife and just started plunging it into the policeman. I've never seen anything like that. I just can't believe what I just saw.
There was bodies, literally.
Must have been about 10 bodies.
10,
yeah,
12 bodies,
shot,
all in different
just lying
places.
in different places along the bridge.
Being shot, yeah.
It must have been terrifying.
It was horrendous, absolutely horrendous.
And I saw a body on the other side of the road, and then there was another body further up, and then when I looked over the side of the bridge, there was another body lying in the water.
I saw people lying on the floor that are obviously injured. I saw about 10 people maybe.
I walked out to go to university, and someone my age came up to me and said there's been a terrorist attack on the bridge. I ran over and I walked up to the bridge, so I wanted to know what had happened, and unfortunately the scenes were pretty terrible. I saw 3 to 4 people, roughly, who had been hit by a car.
I didn't see anything. The first thing I was aware of was just people starting to scream, and people came off the bus looking very shocked. And then there was a lot of confusion, and people started dealing with the casualties.
Terror at the UK Parliament, Westminster Bridge. You heard some of the sights and sounds and eyewitnesses there. We now have confirmed 4 people dead, including the cop, as the perpetrator of this crime used this 7 to 8 inch knife. You heard the one eyewitness watching it being pounded into the police officer. Why some of these officers in London are not armed is beyond any understanding that I possibly can have in my life. The Prime Minister of Great Britain was only 40 yards from the attack in the Parliament and ended up getting out safely. Others now, they're still on lockdown, as I understand it. This, by the way, probably not a coincidence, the anniversary of the Brussels massacre. We know that ISIS has been celebrating ever since the attack, blood for blood. Drudge had an interesting flashback today, and that is that you're going to see the black flag of Sharia over Windsor Castle. And apparently now we have a new development. Police are scrambling to the South London Tube, or the train system, if you will, that they have there. Just to give you a little bit of a timeline, local time, which is, London time, 2:40 Eastern, 2:40 London time. Police were called to Westminster Bridge. Reports that a car had been mowing down people, at least 20-plus people injured, many severely now. And then reports emerging of what sounded like a shooting that was not confirmed. And then as things went on, they initially thought it was a firearms incident, and it turned out to be very different. A major security alert for the police of Westminster, and a man carrying a knife charged through the gates in the front yard of the parliamentary compound. It's believed the same guy that mowed down those people in the car in Westminster Bridge, which is right next to and adjacent to the UK Parliament. Anyway, joining us now with full coverage of this, we're going back to London. And we really appreciate everyone taking time out of their very busy day. Raheem Kassam is the editor of Breitbart London. Nigel Farage, UK Independence Party member of the European Parliament for Southeast of England. And he was, of course, the campaign leader for the Brexit movement. Phil Hannity, a founding member of our Department of Homeland Security, author of the book See Something and Say Nothing. And again, I say to Nigel and Raheem, our thoughts and prayers go out to you and the people of Great Britain. Raheem, what are you hearing on your end? I've seen a name a number of times. Now I'm seeing conflicting reports about that name. What do you know?
Well, thanks, Sean, for the kind wishes. And, of course, all of our thoughts are with the people who have been affected, and indeed the courageousness of the police, how quickly they were deployed and how quickly they secured the area after this terrorist incident this afternoon. As you say, at 2:40 this afternoon, a man crashed the car into the railings outside the House of Parliament, having mowed down a couple of dozen people, it looks like, outside on the Westminster Bridge. What we're hearing now is speculation, of course, over different tube stations, the underground system in the United Kingdom, of course, very famous, different tube stations being closed, being scoured for potential devices or potential people that they might be looking for in connection with this. And you're correct to say that the left-wing Channel 4 broadcasting agency in the United Kingdom were quick to put out a name of a person who they claimed was responsible for this attack earlier on today. That fueled a lot of speculation out there, and a lot of people ended up reporting this person's name. However, we now know from his solicitor and his brother that this person, who was charged with terrorism a couple of years ago,
he was in jail, right?
In prison. He remains in prison, according to his solicitor and his brother. So it just goes to show that actually, when you hear about these people jumping on these attacks, when you hear about the whole fake news saga, this has come from a left-wing news outlet in the UK, and they're now having to row it back. And I think they've really embarrassed themselves over this, especially at a time where people are so concerned with the safety of their loved ones.
My normal instincts is to ignore, and I purposely didn't mention the guy's name, only a first name, which is actually very common. And I'm like, and I was asking the question to somebody, do you think it could be that person? Are you hearing it's that person? Phil Hannity, you are a founding member of the DHS. You had a list of names. You believe that when Barack Obama became president, you were forced to get rid of all of those names. None of this, I'm sure, what happened today surprises you in any way, does it?
No, in fact, I went right back to my active duty mode. I scoured through the resources that were available and then did an analysis of the photographs that were put online by The Guardian. In my immediate conclusions, we call them indicators. It's not necessarily proven derogatory information. However, they are indicators. And what I saw from my first level analysis of the suspect from the pictures posted in The Guardian is that he was likely a Salafi Muslim because of his beard, that he was probably not a new immigrant. And
Philip, can I just confirm? I don't want to interrupt you. I want to hear all this. But you mean the picture I saw the same picture in The Guardian, so you can make an analysis based on that picture. So go explain that to people, and if they want to look at the Daily Mail or The Guardian, they can.
The first thing I looked at is the big picture, indicators, and I never make an assumption or a decision on only one picture. There were two pictures that were shown immediately after the man was down and then post-inspection. They did a strip search on him, and I made sure that all the people that were in the two pictures were the same, and other physical indicators, and then I looked at the individual himself. And by the indicators, first of all, his facial hair. Salafi Muslims often shave the mustache area of their beard. Also, I noticed that he was probably not a new immigrant just by his body, the way his body looked. And the third is that he was probably from the Indian subcontinent just because of other physical indicators. Again, they're indicators, not proven derogatory information. But if I was an active duty law enforcement officer working on that case, on the ground, as a subject matter expert in counterterrorism, those would be my first indicators of the likely nature of the suspect involved in the attack.
I understand exactly what you're saying. This is so important that you're able to do this. I mean, I've always admired your work. Nigel Farage, let me ask you first. Hang on. We got to take a break here. Let me take this break, and we'll get to Nigel Farage, good friend of the program. And Nigel, I guess you got on late. Our thoughts and prayers go to you and all our friends in Great Britain. And we'll get your take on this. We're going to do this with Philip Hannity, and Raheem Kassam and Nigel Farage for the full hour. Then we'll have Newt Gingrich, and we'll also have two members of the Freedom Caucus. Two other stories we're following beyond the London terror attack today, and that is Devin Nunes confirming, yes, there was surveillance on Donald Trump, at least in November, December, and January. Trump was right. Sean Hannity was right. Breitbart was right. Sarah Carter, John Solomon were right, and the rest of the media was wrong. And then, of course, we are following and monitoring the vote that will take place tomorrow on repealing and replacing Obamacare. And we have two Freedom Caucus members that will join us, Jim Jordan and Dave Bratt. All right, as we roll along, Sean Hannity Show, we are in Chicago today. Three big stories: the terror attack at the UK Parliament and Westminster Bridge. That's our top story. Devin Nunes, the House Intelligence Committee chairman, confirming, yes, Donald Trump, surveillance of Trump Tower and the president in November, December, and January. That means all the media wrong, and the lead up to the health care vote tomorrow. And we continue with Philip Hannity, Raheem Kassam, and Nigel Farage is now joining us. Nigel, our thoughts and prayers are with our friends in Great Britain. You know that, my friend.
Yes, no, thank you. It's been a horrible day. It has been 10 years since we had a terrorist attack in London. We all knew that it was coming. And whilst, as yet, the correct identity of the perpetrator has not been revealed, I don't think it's a coincidence that it's exactly 1 year ago today that there were bombs on the underground system in Brussels and over 30 people killed.
Yeah, so you think it could be related because of the anniversary of that?
Well, it's certainly a fact that some of these extreme terror organizations do like to go for anniversaries. I don't think it's a coincidence. We'll have to see. The truth will come out, but I think we all know what the likely source of this is, don't we?
Well, we are ever so vigilant. I can tell you, usually, as you know, 9/11, 2001, and so we're vigilant on a whole variety of days ourselves. Raheem, what do you know about the people? There was a report that apparently it's hundreds of tourists on London's 450-foot Ferris wheel, which I assume is on Westminster Bridge or adjacent to it, were caught on the Ferris wheel at the time and watching this terror unfold before their eyes.
Yeah, I mean, you can only imagine how these people must have felt being suspended in these glass cubicles of the London Eye for hours on end with a direct line of sight to Westminster Bridge and the destruction that was going on there, and not being able to sort of be told accurately what was going on, whether they were safe or not. I mean, this is how people felt all across Westminster today. You had members of our Parliament who were stuck inside the Commons chamber when it was on lockdown. You had people stuck inside Westminster Abbey. And I think Nigel's absolutely correct. I don't think this is necessarily coincidental that this happened. And it's not coincidental, not least because we've seen how much the automobile is now becoming the weapon of choice for Islamist killers. People like you and I, for a very many years, have warned about these tactics being used against our Israeli friends.
100%. Stay right there. We'll continue more with Raheem Kassam, Philip Hannity, Nigel Farage. Newt Gingrich is coming up, and two Freedom Caucus members. We got a lot of news. Busy news day. Sad news in London. All right, 25 till the top of the hour in Chicago today, AM 560. The Answer. And I got to tell you, we got 3 top stories we're following. One, the confirmation by Devin Nunes, House Intelligence Committee Chair Donald Trump, as president-elect in November, December, and January, was surveilled by the intelligence community. He was right. What did Obama know? When did he know it? Our second big story, the health care vote tomorrow. We've got Newt Gingrich, Freedom Caucus members joining us in the next hour. But we continue with Nigel Farage, who has to run in a minute. And Philip Hannity and Raheem Kassam is with us. Nigel, I want to get your final thoughts on this. You know, one of the big issues you and I have discussed privately and we have discussed on the air, and that is the Islamization of Europe and how this also impacts America's decisions on extreme vetting of refugees that may not want to assimilate and hold on to Western values, and, of course, border security in the case of America. But my observation is the Islamization of Europe and the migrant problem and the refugee problem has now added significantly to the danger of everybody in Europe. Am I wrong?
Well, we're looking at about 2.5 million people that have come into the European Union over the course of the last couple of years. And, of course, they've done so because Mrs. Merkel said, as many of you as want to come can come. We've not been able to vet any of them. And, of course, ISIS themselves have said that they would use that tide of people to put their own terrorist operatives into Europe. So goodness knows how many potential terrorists there are now living in Germany, Belgium, France, and elsewhere. But the big takeout for today, I think, is that when Donald Trump tries to do things as the American president to try and make your country safer, all we see are people protesting in Fifth Avenue and screaming and shouting with indignation. I would say to those people, wake up. Let your president make your country safer. You do not want to get like much of Europe.
Very well said. Nigel, again, our thoughts and prayers go out to our friends in the UK. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
I want to go back to Raheem Kassam, who's the editor of Breitbart London. You know, this is the main question we've been asking, though, is how do you possibly vet somebody's heart? How do you possibly know what their motivation is? Also, when you factor in that ISIS, all these radical Islamic terror groups, and even those that made comments and promises that the flag of Sharia will fly over Windsor Castle, you never really will know, will we, about people that come into your country?
No, we won't know, and we have to take it on what they say. They've been saying what they've wanted for years, not least the Islamic black flag flying over Windsor Castle, but they have been very clear about them radicalizing people in prisons, in schools. These aren't things that are new to us. It has just been a lack of political will that has led us to this position. I just got back from a lot of the no-go zones across Europe where they ghettoize these people and create the perfect conditions for radicalization in these areas. And what is our response? What was our response last year in Brussels to this day when there was the Brussels attack? Teddy bears, tears, candles, cartoons, murals, mosaics, flowers, flags, projections, hashtags, balloons, wreaths, vigils, lights, scarves. This seems to be the best that Western civilization can now muster in order to defend ourselves. Well, I'll say this, and I won't be beat around the bush in saying it. Somebody needs to get a grip on this situation and get a grip soon. We've seen now what it's led to in terms of political uprisings across the European continent. We've seen what it's led to here in the United States. But let me echo what Nigel said, but give a warning to this administration as well. This president was elected on the basis of making America safe, and if there is any equivocation over that, if they bow down to political correctness in the slightest, and something happens like that over here in the United States again, I don't think anybody will forgive them.
I honestly, I've been using the phrase, they will have blood on their hands. You know, Philip Hannity, I have come to admire so much about you, and as one of the founding Department of Homeland Security members and somebody that really fundamentally is devoted now many decades of your life dealing with this issue. I just count on you as a go-to person in times of trouble like this. And I don't know if there is an answer to vetting. I do support the president's extreme vetting, but I don't know if real vetting is even possible. Am I wrong in that conclusion?
Well, not in... If you're going to rely on information from these 6 core countries that we keep hearing about, we just had a conversation with a person, an American on the ground in one of the Middle Eastern countries, and he specifically noted that it's literally impossible to vet individuals because we don't have the technology or the backup, paper records within the government to verify who they are. And even if we were able to verify them, they're related to other individuals who may be affiliated with terrorism who will pose a threat either to them directly or to their family. Can I go back to the indicators for a minute?
Yeah, please. I really appreciate you do.
There are two classes of indicators. There are the actual ID of the individual, which we talked about a few minutes ago, and there are also the methods, because these kind of attacks tend to follow a pattern that has been laid down by previous attackers. So one of the classes of what we call first-level analysis are the methods. And in this case, it's a classic pattern of using a car, as your earlier guest said, and a knife. He drove right across the bridge. It's obvious from the pictures that the car had no intention to stop. In other words, he was literally trying to crash right through the gate, just like the Beirut bombings back with the Marine barracks. The same thing, to crash through, survive it, come out and attack as many people as possible. So if you combine those two areas of indicators, the actual person and the methods used, you can begin to put a premise together. And why is this all important? Because first of all, from a cop's perspective, we don't know how many people are involved in the attack. In order to narrow down the arena of operation, we have to be able to determine what likely kind of people would be affiliated with the known attacker. And that is the reason why we focus on the identity of the individual as soon as possible. We don't even have to know his name necessarily. We have other indicators, as I've already discussed with you, that combined together allow us to develop a case, and then we move forward from there.
Mr. Hannity, I honestly mean this with all my heart. We have to get you in touch with the president and his national security team and the Department of Homeland Security. Your country really could use your professional expertise in keeping this country safe, and I appreciate all the knowledge you always share. Rahim, I want to go back to you specifically about Great Britain, about Europe in particular. You have told me on this program before that you were raised Muslim, and we have gone into deep detail about the fact that in spite of media reluctance to acknowledge a simple truth that no-go zones exist in Europe, they do exist, number one. And number two, if you look at, for example, assimilation and some of these other issues, that is not happening as evidenced by the 83-plus Sharia courts that exist in Great Britain, right?
Right. I mean, your listeners will remember just a few weeks ago when your president made a statement about what was going on in Sweden. He was attacked by the Swedish political establishment, the European political establishment, the British political establishment, the U.S. political establishment, the media establishment, all across the board. And the very next day, we saw the most heinous images and videos coming out of one of the suburbs of Stockholm showing a mass migrant background person riot, 40-odd people burning the cars, so on and so forth. I went to these places. I went to Rinkeby. I went to Husby. I've been to Molenbeek a number of times. I went to the suburbs of Paris. I've seen these places for myself. What we have to get around here is the semantic factor. What the left want to try and do is use semantics against us to say, oh, well, you clearly went there, so they can't be a no-go zone. And I say in return, okay, fine. Put on a police uniform and go there by yourself anytime after dusk. See what happens to you. Put on an ambulance uniform and do the same. Be a local politician and do it. Try being a young Western woman with blonde hair. Walk through there with a knee-length skirt on. You cannot. And if you do, you're taking your life into your own hands. The assimilation isn't working for a very simple reason, Sean. In all of these places all across Europe, the left finds it politically expedient to bundle all these people together in housing voting blocks in tenements so that they get them to vote en masse for them. There's no sign of any wider integration with society. They have big satellite dishes on the outsiders of their houses because they want to receive foreign language television, and the state says 2 thumbs up, that's fine by us. Well, what you can see happening here is the perfect petri dish conditions for radicalization happening. And that is not to say that every single person in these no-go zones will become a radicalized Muslim, but it is to say that you are allowing the conditions to ferment. And like you said, Sean, these people who have done this, these socialist parties, these center-left parties, these establishment parties, they all have blood on their hands every single time an incident like this happens.
It's really pathetically sad. And, you know, I kept asking the question and ask it today, and I've asked it on television, and I ask it, and I bring it up in commentary all the time, that, you know, we're really talking about a very simple choice here, and that is the inconvenience of people that would like to visit our country versus gambling with the lives of the American people. Philip Haney, is when you look at the extreme vetting issue, doesn't it come down to those simple choices?
Well, when I was active duty, I interviewed hundreds of people from all over the world. The main problem that we're looking at is the fact that these core countries that we keep hearing about, except for Iran, which is a state sponsor of terrorism, don't have functioning governments. Why should we be expected to trust any information coming from a place that's ruled by violence and anarchy? And until we can determine that the information that these individuals' passport documents and visas and so on is really accurate, then why should we take any risk at all? We should err on the side of caution until we're able to verify its true identity. That's
it's
a
really
fundamental
that simple.
Part of sovereignty. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's all Donald Trump wants to do. Listen, I want to thank you both. I know we got you both short notice here. Philip Haney, Raheem Kassan, and we just let go of Nigel Farage. Thank you all for being with us. We're following 2 other stories, and that is Devin Nunes, House Intelligence Committee chairman, confirming surveillance of Trump Tower, also surveillance of calls with the president-elect in November, December, and January. And then we only have the Democratic ranking member, Adam Schiff, whining, well, he didn't tell us yet, and that doesn't mean that Obama ordered it. Okay, why were they surveilling the incoming president? A lot of questions need to be answered. But the media, alt-left propaganda, destroy Trump media is wrong again. Again. Anyway, let's get to our busy telephones here as we say hi to Lisa in Alaska. Hey, Lisa, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Sean. How are you?
Welcome to Chicago, the Windy City. What's going on?
Well, I just wanted to say the Dems really need to prove that Trump and Russia have colluded, because one of the main reasons that I voted for him, and probably a lot of other people, was because he wasn't owned by special interests.
Yeah, pretty unprecedented, isn't it? And pretty unprecedented that, you know, what happened to Michael Flynn. These are called felonies if they did it. You know, and the fact that they're revealing these names, that, too, is not supposed to happen. I mean, every single protection, 4th Amendment, 5th Amendment, 6th Amendment, 1st Amendment, 4th, 6th, they're all violated here because these are unwarranted searches. And this is going to end up being a much bigger story. And I predict the news media is going to have so much egg on their face by the time this is all said and done. I'll give you the last word. Go ahead.
No, I just think that they need to really gear up for the next election, because they've got to find a candidate that can say, I'm not owned by this corporation or that corporation that gave me money for my campaign.
Very well said, Lisa. Thank you. In Alaska, 800-941-SEAN, toll-free telephone number. All right, the News Roundup Information Overload Hour. We start with former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. He'll weigh in on today's terror attacks in London. Terror attacks, well, there really were 2 separate incidents by the same person, but one on Westminster Bridge and, of course, the UK Parliament. We're following the Devin Nunes revelation today that there was surveillance on the president-elect himself and on Trump Tower. And then our third story, we're monitoring and following what's happening in the lead-up to tomorrow's vote in the House of Representatives to repeal and replace Obamacare. The Freedom Caucus says they have enough votes to stop it, and as of now, they are voting nay against the bill. We'll have two of them join us also coming up in the final hour of our program today. As we continue from Chicago, many thanks to our affiliate here, AM 560, The Answer. All right, news roundup and information overload. Obviously, we continue with our top story today, and that is the attack at the UK Parliament. And you have, 2 people killed, cop stabbed, more than dozens injured in this attack. And we're getting the very latest information to you as it comes into the newsroom here at the Sean Hannity Show. Also, the House Freedom Caucus will have 2 members at the bottom of this hour. We'll have Jim Jordan and Dave Bratt. They are saying as of right now that, in fact, they do not have the votes to pass the health care repeal replace bill tomorrow. They have specific objections. They'll tell us all about it at the bottom of the hour. Also, another big blockbuster from my perspective, and that is the comments of the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes saying that, yes, in fact, that Donald Trump and Trump Tower and his transition team, that they were, in fact, surveilled at least in November, December, and January, post-election. Now, remember, we have been confirming this now for 2 weeks with Sarah Carter and John Solomon, and everybody else in the media has had it wrong. And now we have to ask, was the FBI director parsing his words earlier this week? Well, there's no wiretapping. All right, what's the difference between wiretapping and surveillance? And something we will be getting to the bottom of, probably more tomorrow in this program, although, of course, the health care vote is scheduled tomorrow. Former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, is with us on this very busy news day. Mr. Speaker, I had you on this program on 9/11. I've had you on this program on other news days when, in fact, another terror attack has taken place. Here we have it in London. I've been giving out crime statistics since the migration of people from countries like Syria and elsewhere have been absorbed into the European population. We talk about the Islamization of Europe. And then we have a debate in this country about building walls and vetting refugees. Do you see it all interconnected here?
Well, sure. So, look, it's all the same crisis. You have people who want to destroy Western civilization, people who want to impose their values and their way of life, and they're prepared to kill to do it. And we see this, all across the world. It's a really, really deep problem. And I think that we have to confront the fact that this is not going to go away. We can talk about ISIS, but ISIS is one tiny piece of a worldwide problem, and we're going to ultimately have to have a grand strategy to defeat the worldwide movement as well as to defeat components of it, whether they're in Syria or Iraq or Afghanistan or what have you. I also think it's very important to recognize that we in the United States have every right to defend ourselves. I'm stunned when people explain to me, this judge, for example, in Hawaii, that we somehow owe it to the entire planet to allow them to come here as long as anybody from their country is here. I mean, this is the sort of invitation to a disaster that you would think responsible people would never engage in, and it tells you how bad some elements of our left are. They don't, no matter how many attacks you see, they don't seem to get it.
It's so sad. I mean, Boston Marathon, of all the talk about Russia, the Russians warned us about the Tsarnaev brothers in that case, and we didn't listen to them. Then you have Chattanooga. Then you have Fort Hood, workplace violence, of course. Then the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, San Bernardino, and all over Europe, from Germany to France to Great Britain to Belgium and all throughout Europe. The crime statistics have more than doubled almost everywhere. And America is on the precipice, and in the Obama years, was making the same mistake as Europe has made over the years. And look at how difficult it is for the president, even though he has the statutory authority and the authority as commander-in-chief to protect the country. Then the liberals just go judge shopping in Hawaii or Washington, knowing that it's then going to be appealed to the Ninth Circuit, which is one of the most overturned courts in the country, and then we have to push it all the way to the Supreme Court. In the meantime, thousands of people come in unvetted into the country.
So, I mean, it seems to me that you've got, and then we need to understand this. There are people placed in the government. This is one of the places where the Trump team has got to get to be much more aggressive and, I think, much more determined. There are folks who permeate this government who believe in exactly the things Donald Trump is opposed to, and who believe in putting Americans at risk rather than being honest about the dangers in the world. And these folks are going to have to be rooted out and dismissed. And I think we underestimate, and this, of course, is part of what I think this shocking news story, which I frankly only saw in the last 10 minutes, that the head of the Intelligence Committee in the House is now saying that, in fact, Trump was part of a collection process and was under surveillance. I mean, you have to say to yourself, what the devil is going on when the FBI director gets up, the head of the National Security Agency gets up, and tells us things that are apparently either they're ignorant or lying. And how does the system get so totally out of control? And this is all part of the same problem. You have generals and ambassadors and people who over the last 8 years have been told by Obama and his team, you will never say the words, radical Islamic terror, or you will be kicked out of the service or kicked out of the State Department. So they've all learned this mind-numbing language, and they've all learned how to sort of say things very carefully and make sure you don't hurt anybody's feelings. Meanwhile, as you're pointing out, you have people getting killed in London. We now discover, as has happened often in the last couple of years, that Donald Trump's tweets may have been accurate, and all of the attacks of the New York Times and the Washington Post and the news media and the Democrats may turn out to be false.
Mr. Speaker, for 2 weeks now straight, I have been putting on radio and television John Solomon, a 20-year vet with the AP, Sarah Carter, 20-year foreign investigative journalist on this program. That we have been telling everybody that there were two specific warrants issued, one a FISA warrant, one a regular warrant. In fact, we knew this surveillance took place. We also knew that surveillance of Trump's server took place in Trump Tower. And we've been reporting all of this. Everybody in the media has been wrong. Donald Trump, okay, maybe he used the word wiretap, but it really was surveillance. Now we're parsing, and now we're splitting hairs.
I hate to tell you, I'm reasonably bright, and I used to be on the Gang of Eight looking at secrets. I don't know that I would know the difference between wiretap and surveillance. I mean, I think somebody walks in and says, well, we didn't technically wiretap you because, your cell phone doesn't have a wire. I mean, that's a person you just want to punch in the head. That's goofy.
Well, it is. But when the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes is now confirming that he's calling it incidental collection of communications. Now, there's very specific, we have the Espionage Act, there's very specific language that says if an American is picked up in the process of surveilling, say, a foreign target or an ambassador or, let's say, Vladimir Putin, because everyone's obsessed with Russia, and they notice an American is on the call, they are supposed to minimize their listening, number one, of who the American is. Number two, standard practice is that when they write up a report that you don't name who the American was. You just say an American. And the third thing is it's never supposed to be leaked. And where the Solomon Carter investigation seems to be leading us to is that not only was part of this the entire narrative that Russia and the Trump campaign colluded, even though there's not been one shred of evidence that the media has been running with now for 8 months. But on top of that, that in fact, that in every single case, it seems to be that only a top security clearance individual could have known the things that are being leaked. That's problematic.
By the way, it also makes me wonder, though, how does Trump know all this? I mean,
does Trump
he somehow, I don't know if he gets it just by intuition or if he has a source, but he somehow weeks ago was ahead of everybody. They all ridiculed him and attacked him.
They're still doing it.
But if it turns out now that he was totally right and they were wrong, I mean, I think that'll be just an amazing turnaround, and one that we ought to really think about how to drive home for the country. That here you had the entire elite media, all of the Democrats, some of the Republicans, and the civil service all chanting, why is he doing this? And it turns out, well, he's doing it because he's right.
Well, that will be amazing. That is going to be the way it turns out, and I actually think it's going to backfire even further. I think by the time we get to the end of this story, you're going to see a political quotient involved here at a very, very high level. That's my bet on this. And don't bet against me. I'm often right. All right. More importantly, so at the bottom of this half hour, we have two Freedom Caucus members, Jim Jordan and Dave Bratt, and they are steadfast. They have been meeting, not with the leadership in Congress. They have pretty much ignored the Freedom Caucus. They have the votes, they've told me, and they even have built a hidden cushion, I've been told, that they will stop this bill tomorrow, and that they've heard very little to nothing from leadership. Donald Trump and Mike Pence have reached out to them continuously throughout the process, and that they're going to vote against it unless they get a few specific changes.
I don't understand where we are, and as you know, I used to be the Republican whip, and after that I was the Republican speaker. It will be a major mistake for Speaker Ryan to bring a bill to the floor if he doesn't have the votes. The last thing you want to do to a brand new president is march him up the hill and have him lose and then have to march back down again. I think
my question is, why aren't they? Well, I got to take a break here. Hang on 1 second. We'll come right back and I'll pick that up. And as we continue, we're in Chicago today at AM 560, The Answer, and our many thanks to our affiliate here for all their hospitality. 800-941-SEAN, toll-free telephone number. At the bottom of the hour, we have two Freedom Caucus members. Freedom Caucus saying they do not have a deal, and they do have the votes to stop the health care bill from passing tomorrow. One of our top three stories today, obviously the terror attack. We're monitoring the very latest out of London. And Devin Nunes, the House Intelligence Committee chairman, confirming that, yes, Donald Trump was surveilled in November, December, and January. The media has been wrong. All right, Mr. Speaker, you were saying that if, in fact, the Freedom Caucus, and again, they complain that the leadership barely reached out to them during this process, that if they don't have the votes tomorrow and they risk a loss on this vote, that they shouldn't bring it to the floor. Why don't they just reach out to the Freedom Caucus and give them the three things that they want right now and get it done?
They're going to have to bring it to the floor sooner or later. I mean, I do not understand why people haven't sat in a room and worked out an amendment that would guarantee passage of the bill. They're very close. And the folks, and I just checked this morning, and know that the leader of the Freedom Caucus wants to vote yes. I mean, none of these guys want to stop Donald Trump, and they're very frustrated. And so, to be honest, I don't understand why they're where they are. If, in fact, Speaker Ryan has the votes, that's fine. But it struck me that there's a little bit of a gamble going on here, and I don't think it's right to put the president in a position where he risks a loss at the very beginning of his presidency. This is fixable, and frankly, I have been told, at least one of the things, the argument is, well, it won't get through Senate reconciliation. It doesn't matter. That's the Senate's problem. That's not the House's problem. If they have something that they can do that will allow the Freedom Caucus to feel in good conscience that they can vote yes, the fact that Mitch McConnell can't build it in the Senate is Mitch's problem. He'll fix it. Now, when you get to conference, you're in a different place. But they now know where their problems are, and by the time they get to conference, they'll have had weeks to sort this out and figure out what is a conference bill that can pass the House and the Senate. I'm really perplexed that we don't see more flexibility right now on just getting something to 216 votes. And by the way, I've always felt like you need to be at 219 or 220 just because somebody may not quite keep their word.
Yep. Well, I got to tell you something. From my perspective, I would have worked with those guys from the beginning because they have the support of a lot of people. And I give all the president credit. When I asked Mark Meadows, I said, well, what's it been like negotiating with the president? What's it been like negotiating with the leadership in the House? Well, he said Trump gets an A+++. He said, well, the House never contacts us, the House leadership. Isn't that bizarre?
I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. It's not the way I think that it works in the long run. My model has always been listen, learn, help, and lead. and I think that you have to approach it from that standpoint. And I think that if you don't listen and learn, it's very hard in a free society to lead. It's just a practical reality.
All right, Mr. Speaker, you're going to join us tonight. We have all these stories breaking. We'll have the latest, obviously, out of London. We'll talk about Devin Nunes's comments that, yes, Donald Trump was surveilled. By who? Why? We'll get maybe have more details by then.
Well, it's going to be an amazing show tonight because you have so many things moving in parallel that are real right now, right this minute.
And, of course, the health care bill. All right, Mr. Speaker, as always, thanks for being with us. When we come back, we do have two members of the Freedom Caucus. What would it take for them to get on board, and how united are they against the bill if they don't get the things they're asking for? We'll get that next, and we'll continue to monitor the events out of London and much more here on the Sean Hannity Show.
Accountable. Sean gets the answers no one else does. America deserves to know the truth about Congress.
All right, 25 now till the top of the hour, 800-941-SEAN, our toll-free telephone number. We continue to monitor and follow all the breaking news that is out of London. Another terror attack shouldn't shock anybody. And we will have full coverage tonight, a live Hannity, as we continue our coverage here on the radio program today. But there is so much other breaking news out there that we've got to pay attention to. Now, of course, we're expecting a House vote tomorrow on this health care repeal and replace bill. Sean Spicer commented on this at his presser earlier today, and here's what he said. This actually was yesterday.
Sean, is the president going to hold Republicans that vote against health care accountable? Are they going to pay a price if they vote against this bill?
I think they'll probably pay a price at home, meaning I think that you can't go promise over and over again since 2010 in the case that the member's been there that long, but at least for those who have been there that long, and at least and even the new ones, this was a major component of the last election. And I think there was probably not a single Republican member in itself who went out and talked about this. And I think when you realize the component to this bill and that the president worked with the House and the Senate to put something together that achieved a promise that was made to voters, I think there's going to be a price to be paid, but it's going to be with their own voters. And they're going to have to go back and explain to them why they made a commitment to them and then didn't follow through. And one of the things that's interesting that people who agree or don't agree with the president in terms of his legislative agenda at least give him high marks, regardless of whether or not they subscribe to his agenda, for keeping his word and his promises. And I think that's one of the things that he's made very clear this morning. We pledge to the American people at the congressional level, at the Senate level, at the federal, at the presidential level, to go do something. And this bill, while it probably not everybody gets everything they wanted, does exactly what we said. It's repealing it and replacing it with all of the principles and the aspects that we discussed throughout not only last cycle, but in a lot of these cases back through 2010. If we go out there and make these pledges to the American people and don't do what we said we've done on these big things, then I don't think they're going to continue to want to see us in the majority, and they're going to look for an alternative.
And to the second, just about, will he remember the names of those who don't back the bill?
We'll see.
All right, then, of course, the president said yesterday, now this was before the meeting that took place earlier today with some of the members of the Freedom Caucus, and this was his response yesterday.
We had a great meeting, and I think we're going to get a winner vote. We're going to have a real winner. It was a great meeting. They're terrific people. They want a tremendous health care plan. That's what we have, and there are going to be adjustments made. But I think we'll get the vote.
Now, the gap has been closed for sure, but as of now, the Freedom Caucus members are not voting for this bill. There are two specific issues that they are demanding for their support, or else they don't think they can support it. And as a bloc, they have enough votes to make it that this bill's not going to pass. Anyway, they want the repeal of the Obamacare mandates and the essential health benefits, and the rest they think they can live with at this time anyway. And again, it's going to be a much longer process, I think, than anybody knows. Anyway, Congressman Jim Jordan and Congressman Dave Bratt join us now, both Freedom Caucus members. Gentlemen, welcome back to the program. Before I get to health care, your reaction. Here, we talk so much about building a wall and vetting refugees, and we turn around again and you see this terror attack in London today, and it just breaks your heart. But what does America have to learn from it? Congressman Jordan.
Yeah, Sean, obviously our hearts go out to the folks in Great Britain. But you're right, it's a dangerous world, and it's one of the key issues. It's the issue that's most important for the federal government. It's one that's constitutionally prescribed with national security and making sure our nation is secure. And the president's been strong on this, and it's why we have to secure the southern border. This is a big part of that. So, but I'm not going to keep up on all the news.
Well, we've been following. I've been giving out all the crime statistics in Germany and all throughout Europe that have gone up dramatically since they've had this influx of migrants into the country, and there's not any vetting that's taking place there. And you'd have to be pretty dumb, I think, Congressman Bratt, to believe we could do the same thing Europe has been doing and expect a different result.
No, I mean, this is we've all been talking about this for years, and I mean, it is ironic, right? The left. There are failed states all through the Middle East, et cetera, going through North Africa, whatever, where these folks are coming in, the terrorists are trained. And it really does go back to the fundamentals that the liberals have always been talking about, right? These are failed states in poverty. Well, guess how you fix that? You fix it with free markets and capitalism and business. So the only answer for these failed states to make their people successful, the left, of course, is opposed to it. Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, et cetera. And so it's the irony of ironies, right, that we're trying to help these people in these countries to develop. That will end this spiral of attacks coming from terrorist countries, and there's a win-win. But the left just will not get on board the basic project of, setting up democracies, the rule of law, and all the fundamentals we take for granted in this country. So,
let me get to the health care bill, and let me ask you both this question. All day I've been reading the Freedom Caucus is not in agreement with the bill, with leadership, with the White House at this point. From my understanding, it now has come down to two very specific issues, and that is repealing the Obamacare mandates and essential health benefits, which would, I'm sure, lower costs for people. Congressman Jordan, we'll start with you. Where is the entire caucus, and what has gone on today? And tell me who you've met with and negotiated with.
A couple key things. One, the opposition in the Freedom Caucus is still strong, and it's strong for a couple key reasons. Does the Speaker's bill repeal Obamacare? No, it doesn't. Even Krauthammer has said it's Obamacare light. That's not my term. That's Charles Krauthammer. Does this bill lower premiums? No, it doesn't. Even CBO said premiums are going to continue to rise. And does this bill unite Republicans? No. Every single conservative organization in the country, major organization, is opposed to this bill, as are conservatives in the House and conservatives in the Senate. So
how many votes do you think? How many votes do you think you have against it? Because this vote's taking place tomorrow, unless they decide they can't win.
Yeah, Sean, the chairman. We don't give out the number, but I will tell you this: they don't. I feel very comfortable in saying that they don't have 216. And the opposition within the Freedom Caucus is very strong.
What do you need to make this work? Because I understood you got a little closer, but not close enough. Tell us about the meetings with the president, the meetings with Vice President Pence.
The mandates and regulations that have driven up the cost. That's what has to go so that premiums actually come down. Never forget what Obamacare did. That we're going to have all these mandates, all these regulations, drive up the cost of insurance, mandate that people buy it, and if they don't, they get a penalty. That's what we have to. That's what we have to overturn. That's what we have to repeal, and we have to do it in a way that actually brings down the cost of premiums for middle-class families so that they can actually pick the plan that fits their needs and be able to afford it.
All right, and that's simple, basic, by the way, free market. That's the free market, which is supposed to be a Republican position, a conservative position. What did they say to you in these meetings specifically about this request?
It was nothing specific. They're talking about some things that may happen, but again, we think this is so important that we have to get it right. And most important, we have to do what we told the American people we were going to do. This bill, as currently drafted, does not do that. So we are working on trying to make sure that it does. It is really that basic. And if the legislation is not going to bring down premiums, then that's not going to solve the problem. And that's not consistent with what the American people elected us to come here.
So my next question is, who's been willing to negotiate with you? Has the president been open to your ideas? Has the vice president? Has Paul Ryan?
Yeah, Sean, the White House, I mean, we met with an hour and a half with a number of folks at the White House, including the vice president. We've talked with President Trump a couple of weeks ago, Mark Meadows and myself, and President Trump's meeting with us. They've been willing to reach out and talk, but again, we appreciate, and the president was great when he came and spoke to us yesterday. I think Dave would say the same thing about the president's presentation to the conference, the entire Republican conference yesterday. But that doesn't change the four corners of the document. That doesn't change the bill, the legislation itself. And it is not accomplishing what the American people sent us here to do.
Do you think they just don't think you guys have the votes to stop it? Or do they think that they're going to be able to twist arms and threaten and admonish you for not keeping your promise because you don't support their bill and they don't want to make changes?
Keeping our promise is doing what we said, and this bill doesn't do it. So we are all about, the Freedom Caucus is all about keeping our promise. This bill doesn't accomplish that, and that's the point which we have been trying to get across with everyone that we've been in discussions with.
Well, has anybody said to you, Dave Bratt, that they're willing to make the changes that will get you on board?
Yeah, well, there is some good news. It's breaking at the last second, and that's what Jim's been saying. We should have been having these conversations all the way through, right? Right at the last second, all the creativity now, even the Senate, right? We're getting some word that the Senate may be open to doing some of the heavy lifting that we haven't heard before. Well, that's all we want. We want Trump to have a successful presidency. And you can't do that, as Jim was saying, when you retain the structure and architecture of
I've heard
Obamacare.
this argument
There's
in
no
past
way prices
debates.
can go down.
Congressman Bratt, I've heard this in the past. No, the Senate will make those corrections for us, or it'll be done in conference.
Right. No, and that's been, I mean, we've been around. That doesn't happen. The Senate is having a very hard time messaging on what their 51 votes can do right now. But the major point we're making is the price has to come down. Trump's a businessman, a consummate businessman. He knows price, product, quality, et cetera, right? That matters. And the average person back home cares about one thing. And so we can't have prices going down 3 years from now, which is the way CBO is scoring this thing. We need immediate relief for our people. And there's only one thing that's keeping that from happening. The insurance, the federally mandated insurance regulations are keeping young people from going out and buying a product that they want to buy at a cheap price. They have to buy this loaded up federal product, right? So there's no shopping across state lines. There's none of the doctor's innovation you've had on interviewing several times. That's all missing. The free market piece comes later. And we're told we can put that in bucket two. But the problem with that is Secretary Price can do that unilaterally as secretary, but then it's not in law. And the Democrats can come back and change it all 4 years later. And that's not good enough when we've been given this once-in-a-century opportunity.
Congressman Jordan, you were going to say something. I interrupted you.
Well, the answer here is really easy, Sean. Start over. I mean, it's real simple. My background's in the sport of wrestling, and one of the things I learned there is sometimes you learn more from the setbacks than you learn from the victories. And there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what? We got to make changes. It's time to redo this bill and do it in a way that's consistent with what the American people expect. That is so simple. It happens all the time in the real world, but somehow here in Washington, oh no, we can't start over. We got to keep ramming through a product that's not consistent with what the American people elected us to do. It's really that basic. So let's start over. Let's put this together in the right way. Let's make sure we get at those regulations and mandates that are driving up the cost of insurance. Let's repeal Obamacare like we said. And for goodness sakes, why not just start with this premise? We just voted on the bill that's a clean repeal legislation 15 months ago. Every Republican was for it then, went to President Obama's desk, he vetoed it. Why not start from that base and then add to it what we can? And
Paul Ryan swears up and down that that's not a full repeal either, the 2015 bill.
No, but it's a good starting point, and it united Republicans, and it's something that we all ran on, and then add in the other things that will get us to full repeal and the kind of replacement we need. That's the simplest and smartest and best path forward. And it's consistent with what the voters want.
After all my years of studying Washington, let me assume what the next number of hours of your life leading up to tomorrow's vote or sometime tomorrow night, it is going to be nonstop arm twisting. It's going to be threats. It's going to be a carrot. It's going to be a stick. It's going to be you'll never get reelected. It's going to be I'll be glad to campaign for you, raise money for you. That's what you're going to hear.
Yeah,
As all of this is there anything that can happen between now and this vote tomorrow that will get the Freedom Caucus on board?
If, in fact, we can bring down premiums, we're going to do what we told the voters we're going to do. We're open to that, and we've been clear about that from the get-go. So that's critical, but this legislation doesn't do that. That's plain and simple.
But you got to be a little more specific. What specifically do you need that will guarantee that for you?
You got to repeal the regulations and mandates that are driving up the cost.
Okay,
it's
so
real
that's
simple.
so what I said at the beginning.
It was exactly what we said at the beginning. All of them, though, not just a part of them. You got to do it all so that we drive down the cost, bring back affordable insurance, and recognize this fundamental fact. The left defines as success as signing people up for government insurance. We define it as bringing back affordable insurance that they can then select, the one that fits their family's needs. That's what we're trying to accomplish.
All right. By the way, did you guys notice what Devin Nunes said today? And that is that, in fact, Trump and his campaign and Trump Tower was surveilled in spite of what Comey said the other day. It wasn't wiretapped. He said, okay, surveillance, wiretap. Now we're playing games. Okay.
Yeah,
all right. Listen, I've got what you guys saying here. We'll have you back on tomorrow if you'll join us and update us. And
Sure.
I agree with your position. I think those changes need to be in the bill. And we'll watch it closely. And you're convinced without those changes, there's no way that bill passes.
Not only the votes are there now, Sean, and we have been clear from the get-go. Clean repeal. Make sure you bring down the premium costs for working class and middle class families. That's what we told the voters. That's what we've been for all along.